So today I want to talk about a concept for coaches that's related to how players learn and their development, and we're talking about that in terms of their game knowledge or game understanding, IQ, call it what you like. And it's a concept called the flipped classroom, which is gaining popularity and acceptance in education circles, and I think can be a really valuable tool in the right situation and context for coaches to use as well. My name's Mark Upton, I'm with Sports Relations. I'm fortunate enough I've had some experience using this approach and seen how it can benefit players in their learning and understanding of whatever you want to call it, game knowledge, tactical awareness, IQs in good basketball IQ, soccer IQ, whatever the sport is, game understanding. And it's looking at ways off the field how we develop those things. So typically video review meetings, chalk and talk type sessions with small groups or your whole team to educate and teach players about these concepts that relate to your particular sport. Today is going to be a lot about assuming that you're able to work with video content. And so what is this flipped classroom or this flipping terminology? So it was derived from this guy here called Salman Khan, who stumbled across an approach, I suppose, where his niece was studying maths, his young niece, and he decided that he started to provide solutions or tutoring to her by recording explanations of equations and so forth on his computer, and he'd actually post those recordings onto YouTube to help her in a maths class. Unbeknownst to him at the time is these videos that he was putting up on YouTube were proving really helpful to other people or other students as well, and he started getting lots and lots of hits or views on this video. So he thought, hang on, there might be something in this approach, and it evolved from there to now where he's got a whole website and a team behind him that is purely dedicated to putting educational based content related around a number of subjects online for students to access. And it's been called flipping because it's often replacing what was done in the classroom. So rather than students having to read textbooks and try and understand and get a grounding in the theory during class, they actually do that online. And hence when it comes to class time, the teacher is more able to hopefully discuss and problem solve with them and take them to that higher level because they've already got that base understanding in place. So that's how it originated. So in coaching terminology and applying it to coaching environments, I think it's moving from this type of situation, might be a chalk and talk type meeting, whiteboard, you got the oval or the pitch set up here. You can imagine video obviously in a lot of situations being shown to this reasonably large group of players. So moving from that to, can we deliver that type of content and information online, for example, or access via a computer and before or in place of that type of team meeting. So it's about, can we deliver content online beforehand or instead of face-to-face meeting time. But I think importantly, and this point is really critical, it's being able to move from this approach here, which is very coach-centered, to this approach here, which is very player-centered. And it's actually, hopefully these pictures depict and illustrate for you, the players are actually the ones communicating, explaining concepts, and the coach is playing a facilitating or a listening role as is appropriate for the situation. So I think that's a second important point about flipping. It's not just putting content online, but it's also how can we put content online and then get the players have to think and tell the coach by perhaps what they input through the computer about what they're seeing, as opposed to those first lot of pictures with the coaches telling the players. We want the players to have to think for themselves and tell the coach so that they have to convey their thoughts, and the coach gets an insight into what the player knows and understands, which is the critical thing. It's not about what the coach knows, it's about what the player knows. So my experiences with perhaps this chalk and talk video review type meeting environment, this was one little bit of research, if you want to call it that I did after one of the team meetings I was involved with 2 or 3 years ago, where I just followed up with a few players. So it was a tactical game review meeting. We played a game on the weekend. It was a couple of days later, we had this video review session where we were going over some of the concepts that perhaps we'd been working on and how we could do them a little bit better. And there were 2 key concepts that meeting revolved around. So 2 days after that, I asked 7 of our players what they recalled about what were the key concepts and what was the information. Only 1 player recalled both of those concepts, 1 out of 7. Only 2 players, another 2 recalled 1 concept. So only 3 out of 7 have recalled either of the concepts. So 4 players recalled neither. And an interesting one is 3 of those 4 didn't actually play in the game, that previous game. So perhaps they weren't even engaged in this type of meeting because the content had lower relevancy for them. Okay, so this engagement is a real critical issue I'll talk about a little bit more too. So the question obviously there is that the best learning environment? In education circles, that's this approach here is called the sage on the stage. So is that the best way to engage, and is it creating the best learning environment for your players? Or perhaps there's other ways to do it where you get the players to be in the centre, the focus, and you help guide their learning. A quote from Phil Jackson, I think that is very appropriate though, is as coaches often we think it's our part of our role and responsibility to be the fountain of knowledge, to be the sage on the stage. If we're not seen to be actively coaching, then we're not coaching. Well, that's far from the truth. And the same I think can apply to the off-field teaching situations where unless we're the centre and we're distributing the knowledge, perhaps we don't feel like we're coaching, but we are. So I think this quote here about role of the coach in some situations is to facilitate creating the best learning environment for the players to learn the concepts. So in this case, the game knowledge concepts, the tactical awareness concepts that are the focus of this presentation. So it's facilitating that environment, which sometimes might mean the coach is directly involved, and he does tell. A lot of the times, though, it's actually the players that you want to make the centre focus. They need to do the telling. They need to convey their thoughts, interact, discuss. So let's look at an actual example and a tool that you can use to actually do this flip. So we've come up with at Sports Relations a tool that we're calling the Coach Enhancement Platform. And we've given it this description because our primary goal with the tool is actually to help coaches reflect on their own coaching. So the video is actually of coaches taking training sessions and etc. and then being able to look at their own coaching and see what they could have done better. But the way the tool works is it is perfect for using this flipped classroom approach to develop your players as well, because it satisfies the 2 key criteria. You can deliver your video content online, players can access it online, but through the commenting feature that I'll go through in a second, that players, you can set it up so that players have to do the thinking, they have to input their thoughts and understanding. So you get this player thinking and telling the coach. So perfect for this flipped classroom approach. Let's take a look at how it might work. So I'm at the Coach Enhancement Platform website. I'm about to log in as a player. So I'm a basketball player here in this case. And I go to my video library here. I've got one video called Offensive Concepts that's been uploaded by the b-ball coach. So I can play that or load that in. There's the video there. And on the right here, I've got this comments list. So I might have been told by the coach, go through the comments the coach has entered and take the appropriate action. So I can click on a comment, and it's got here, in this case here, the coach has put, see how the wing player passes and then immediately makes a cut, pass and move concept. So I've got that comment by the coach there, and then I've got this 7-second video clip that highlights that concept. So just there. Now I might have missed it the first time, perhaps you did just then, so I can play it again. So the wing player, pass to the post, yep, okay, makes a cut. So pass and move, okay, yeah, I understand it. I can watch it a second time. So that's one way the coach has used the commenting feature. Now, that's still really the coach basically telling the player, he's highlighting it for him so that, and the video illustrates the concept. We'll just flip over to the coach's version here. Let's have a look at how we can change that question around so that we're achieving one of the key things we wanted, which was having to get the player to actually think and then tell the coach or tell us what they think the right option might be in this situation. So let's delete that bit of text and we'll say, after the wing player passes the post, what could he do? So we'll leave it reasonably open-ended question. There could be a few different responses that they could enter here. So it'll be interesting to find out what a player might put in there. And now we need to just adjust the end time for this clip because we obviously don't want to show them actually the player making the cut. So we're just going to adjust the end time here so we can show the pass, and then we're just going to pause it there. So we'll set a new end time there and hit save. So this is now the player viewing it again through the web browser. So now he comes in, he loads the video, he clicks on this comment and he sees a question here instead. So it says, after the wing player passes to the post, what could he do? So obviously the player's going to watch the vision. It's now just a 3-second clip. So he sees the pass, it pauses right at that end point, and now he can reply and enter in what he thinks. So he might say, go and screen for the player at the top, and save that. So that's actually slightly different perhaps from what the coach was putting in, but nonetheless probably still a pretty good option. Obviously the player's having to think a lot more about it and enter in his thoughts. So that, in terms of a learning experience and experience that's going to be remembered by the player, this experience is going to stick. It's going to have a high stick factor with the player so that hopefully he can apply some of these concepts when he's next out on the court or out on the field. So that's a quick look at how the Coach Enhancement Platform works to facilitate this flipped classroom approach. Now, unfortunately, it's not a silver bullet. There are some challenges in this approach. So obviously for some, acquiring your content, in this case video examples of game footage or training footage, for some it might be a challenge. For others they might have plenty of this sort of thing available. Obviously the higher level you coach, you tend to have more access to the good video content. It does take some time to prepare it, including uploading it onto a platform such as the Coach Enhancement Platform. But one of the key things is you have to have a good think about, like we saw there, how you frame your questions or your comments, or how you guide the player through the process of discovering and understanding some of the concepts you want to teach. Whereas sometimes when you go into a team meeting, I know I've been in the situation myself as a coach where you've got your content, time's tight, you go into the meeting, you haven't really thought about how you're going to present it, but you just get the vision up there and you just start talking through it, which is, like we've just discussed, is probably not as effective, but you get away with it. So you certainly need to think about how you're going to set up the learning situation, along with what, as in what type of content or what concepts do you want to teach and show. Players have to feel comfortable that they can input things. If they respond in a way that might not be completely correct or differs a bit from what other players or coaches think, that's okay. It's not an exam, it's not a test where they need to be scared of failure. Another challenge is the technology in terms of access and usability of that, but I've put a line through that because I think that no longer is the challenge it was. You've just seen how the Coach Enhancement Platform can work. YouTube can offer you a similar experience, so I think technology is no longer the barrier it was. So they're challenges, but what about the advantages? We've talked about hopefully creating a good learning environment for the players to learn, to increase their game knowledge and understanding, because we've got this on-demand accessibility of players can watch the vision and read the questions or respond, and they can do that as many times as they like, whenever, wherever. The repeat to remember theory with learning is important, so it provides that option. it engages them more, and it's perhaps more personalised. Whilst you think, how can engaging or interacting with a computer be more personalised than a coach standing out the front? But the reality is, when you start to operate a computer and you get to play the video back when you want to, and look at it and pause it, you're actually more engaged with the content, as opposed to slumping in your chair and almost drifting off to sleep at times while the coach is out the front. So it can create a more engaging experience if it's done right, and particularly with younger players that are so comfortable with this sort of technology. And the key one that we've talked about a lot already, players having to think for themselves. So they can't just rely on the coach out the front telling them about it, and then being able to walk out of the meeting room and not really having taken anything in or understood. They actually have to demonstrate and think for themselves, which is the key one. So does this approach work? Is it creating the quality learning environment? Well, 2 or 3 years ago, we used this quite extensively with the team I was involved in coaching. We started our pre-season in November of 2008. And competition period started in March of 2009. And so these percentages, we actually quizzed our players on their game knowledge or their understanding, and you can obviously see throughout the course of the year that was improving, which was great. And obviously this flipped classroom approach, not that it was called that back then, played a role in that, along with all our on-field training and other coaching techniques. We clearly saw some improvement to suggest that the flipped classroom type approach was creating a good learning environment for players to increase their game knowledge about how we want to play and just general principles of our game. A really valuable one, the other thing I've found, is that as a coach, you find out what the player knows and also a bit about how they think about the game, which you don't get obviously in that team meeting situation. And that allows you to individualise your coaching and understand the individual a bit better, which in a team sport, when you quite often have large squads of 10 or more players, it can be hard to achieve that. So that can be a really valuable thing. If you've got a bit of time, can sit down at night and go through what players have entered, you get a real good insight into how they're thinking, which allows you to then communicate better with that individual when you do meet them face to face, and probably establish a better relationship with them. When you do get that face-to-face time as a team, for example, you've then got the option of, you don't have to worry about taking up time with maybe the meetings and showing video. You can maybe go straight out on the field, get into it, and then maybe link back to the video at some stage through the training, or link back to what they've gone through online through your training session to link up or scaffold that learning. Or you could still have some off-field meeting, chalk and talk stuff, but you're actually already building on the concepts that they understand and discussing it more. So it becomes a bit more of a two-way street in terms of communication between players or players and coach. And the final one, this was a coach mentioned to me just a few weeks ago, is sometimes as a coach you want to be seen to be getting any advantage you can. So an approach like this is seen to be a bit cutting edge, a bit innovative. And he said sometimes players want to see that in their coaches as well. Some could argue maybe it's a placebo effect, but it can have an advantage nonetheless. So there we go. That's the flipped classroom approach for you. It doesn't suit every situation. It won't be for every type of concept you're trying to coach, but there might be opportunities for you to have a go at it, which we'd love. If you'd want to find out more about the Coach Enhancement Platform, feel free to follow those links, or send me an email to discuss anything. Love talking about this stuff. So give it a go and love to hear how you go with it.